In the courtroom, my mother smiled. Her forged documents were perfect. She was about to take millions from my autistic brother, the son she'd abandoned 11 years ago. Our lawyer had given up. But my brother, the quiet boy everyone underestimated, leaned in and whispered, "Let her talk." He was about to expose every lie. My name is Daniel. I'm 21 now, but this story started when I was 10. It started with a silence that lasted 11 years. I was home from college on winter break, sitting in the one place that always felt like solid ground, my Grandma Eleanor's house. The air smelled like cinnamon and old books the way it always did. In the corner of the living room, my younger brother Ethan was in his element. He was 16, and his world was the soft click-clack of his keyboard. His fingers flew across the keys of the new high-end laptop, the one his own $3.2 million software had bought him. For the first time in our lives, things felt stable. Peaceful, even. Then the doorbell rang. I figured it was just a package and went to get it. But when I opened the door, the floor dropped out from under me. Standing on the porch was a woman in a tailored coat smelling of expensive perfume. She was a stranger, but her face was one I knew from the faded photographs Grandma kept in a box in her closet. The smile she gave me didn't reach her eyes. Beside her stood a man in a dark suit holding a leather briefcase like a shield. It was Clara, my mother. 11 years. Not a single phone call, not a birthday card, not a goddamn word. Now here she was. My first instinct was to slam the door in her face. My body went rigid and I didn't move from the doorway. I wasn't a 10-year-old kid anymore. I was a man, and this was my family's home. Then I heard a soft footstep behind me. It was Ethan. He came and stood just behind my shoulder, looking past me at the woman who gave birth to him. There was no flicker of emotion on his face. No surprise, no anger, no pain. His eyes were like the lens of a camera just recording. The man in the suit stepped forward. "I'm Mr. Callahan," he said, his voice smooth and rehearsed. "We're here on behalf of Mrs. Clara Jensen Ethan's legal mother." I almost laughed at the title. Legal mother. He ignored me. "We are here to discuss the process of Clara resuming her parental custody and becoming the legal guardian of Ethan's financial assets until he reaches adulthood." The words hung in the cold air. Financial assets. That's what this was about. Not about her son. It was about the money. My mother made a fatal miscalculation when she decided to come back. She looked at our little house and saw an old woman and a quiet, autistic boy she could easily manipulate. She thought she held all the cards. She had no idea that for the past 11 years that quiet boy had been building a system designed for one single perfect purpose: to expose liars. And it was about to get its first real test. 11 years ago, I was 10. The day our family broke apart for good started with a lie that sounded like a promise. It was a Friday in November. I remember being excited for the weekend, no school, maybe a movie with Grandma Eleanor. My mom, Clara, pulled up to the curb in her old red sedan. Ethan, who was 5, stood beside her on the porch, a tiny backpack hanging off one shoulder. "Just for the weekend, Mom," Clara said to Grandma, her voice strained. "I just need a break, please." A bitter, childish part of me was jealous. She's taking him, not me. The thought made me feel sick a second later because I knew Ethan wasn't going somewhere fun. He was just going. To me, my 5-year-old brother was a living puzzle. He didn't talk. He spent his days rocking heel to toe, his hands clamped over his ears even when the house was silent. He lived inside a world I couldn't enter, and as a 10-year-old, I mostly found it annoying. My friends had brothers they could play catch with. I had a brother who would scream if I moved the blue car out of its perfect lineup. Life with him was a minefield of unspoken rules. Grandma Eleanor must have seen something was wrong. "Clara, what's going on?" "I'll call you Sunday," Clara said, already backing away toward her car. She didn't hug Ethan. She didn't even look at him. She just got in, started the engine, and drove off. I watched her taillights vanish, leaving my little brother standing on the porch, still rocking. That weekend was hell. Grandma tried to make Ethan's favorite chicken nuggets, or what Clara had once told her was his favorite. Ethan wouldn't even look at the plate. He wouldn't sleep in the guest bed. The hum of the refrigerator made him flinch. The entire house seemed to hurt him. On Saturday, I heard Grandma on the phone leaving a message. "Clara, honey, please call me back. I just need to know what he eats, what his routine is." Her voice was calm, but I could hear the worry underneath. By Sunday night, the worry had turned to panic. I heard her leaving another message, her voice tighter this time. "Clara, this isn't funny anymore. Call me." But Clara never called. Monday came and went. The red car never reappeared. The weekend became a week, then two. The tiny backpack, which held only one change of clothes and a worn-out stuffed bear, sat by the door like a sad memorial. We all broke in our own ways. I retreated into video games, trying to ignore the constant low hum that came from Ethan's throat. Grandma aged 10 years in a month, her face etched with a permanent frown of worry. The breaking point came on Christmas Eve. Grandma, in a desperate attempt to create some sense of normalcy, decided we would bake sugar cookies. The kitchen filled with the warm, sweet smell of vanilla and butter. For a moment, it almost felt like a real home. Then the phone rang. Grandma snatched it off the wall, her face lit with a hope so fragile it hurt to look at. "Clara," she breathed. I watched her face crumble as she listened. I couldn't hear the words, only the flat, tired tone from the receiver. "What do you mean you can't?" she whispered. "He's your son." A pause. Then, "No. Clara, wait." She stared at the phone in her hand as the smell of burning sugar filled the kitchen. She had forgotten the cookies. She calmly hung up the phone, turned off the oven, and pulled out the blackened tray. She didn't cry. She just folded. She slid down the kitchen cabinets and sat on the cold linoleum floor, surrounded by the bitter smell of smoke. I was frozen in the doorway, a 10-year-old soldier with no orders, no idea how to fix the unfixable. And then Ethan walked in. He saw Grandma on the floor. He saw the ruined cookies. He stood there for a long moment, processing. Then he turned, walked to the counter, and picked up the bright yellow plastic cup that Grandma had given him on his first day here. It was the only thing he drank from. It was his cup. He walked over to Grandma and gently placed it on the floor beside her. He didn't touch her. He didn't make a sound. He just gave her the most important thing he owned. An offering. That was the first time I realized my brother spoke a different language. A language with no words, only truth. And in that moment he was telling our grandmother the one thing she needed to hear. I'm still here. After Clara disappeared, our house became a different country with its own laws and its own language. Ethan was its silent king, and Grandma Eleanor and I were its newest citizens, struggling to adapt. Life was no longer measured in days of the week, but in a series of rigid, unbreakable routines. I called it the system. Mornings were the hardest. Breakfast was always the same: 2 scrambled eggs, not too dry, not too wet, and 1 slice of toast cut precisely corner to corner into 2 triangles. The eggs could not touch the toast. I once watched Grandma try to serve the toast cut into squares, and Ethan emitted a low, guttural sound of distress that didn't stop until she replaced the plate. Some days I'd beg for pancakes or cereal, and Grandma would look at me with eyes so full of exhaustion that my own complaints died in my throat. I was 10, then 11, then 12, and I felt like my own childhood was being overwritten by my brother's needs. The car rides were just as structured. There was only one route to Ethan's therapy sessions. Not the fastest, not the most direct, but the route. One time a water main had broken and a police officer was redirecting traffic. The moment Grandma turned left instead of right, Ethan began to scream. It wasn't a child's tantrum. It was a raw, terrified sound, like an animal in a trap. Grandma had to pull over her hands, shaking on the wheel, while I sat in the back, feeling utterly helpless. I hated the system. I hated how it held us hostage. But then slowly, I started to see something else. I started to see what Ethan saw. It began one afternoon when I was bored. Ethan was on the living room floor with his huge bin of toy cars. He wasn't playing with them, not in the way other kids did. He was lining them up in a single, impossibly long row that snaked from the fireplace to the kitchen doorway. I sat on the couch watching him. For an hour, he worked with the focus of a surgeon, nudging each car a millimeter here, a millimeter there. At first, I thought he was just being weird. But then I got off the couch and looked closer. It wasn't random. He hadn't just organized them by colors together, blues together. He had organized them by shade. The line started with a fire engine red car. The next one was a slightly more orange red. The next was almost rust-colored. Then came a bright orange, then a paler orange, then yellow, then a greenish yellow, and on through every color of the rainbow. It was a perfect, seamless gradient. It was the most beautiful, logical thing I had ever seen. My brother wasn't just lining up toys. He was creating order out of chaos. After that, my annoyance started to turn into curiosity. I started paying attention. I noticed the little notebooks from the dollar store that he carried everywhere. He was always filling them with tiny, cryptic symbols, circles, lines, squares with dots in them. One day, when he left one on the kitchen table, I peeked inside. It looked like nonsense. But then I recognized a pattern. He had drawn a series of little sun symbols, followed by a drawing of a plate with triangles, then a drawing of a car. Morning, breakfast, the drive. He wasn't just scribbling. He was logging data. He was documenting his world, creating a record of what was real and what had happened. He was building his own system of truth. The shift in my understanding was a quiet one, but it was total. Ethan wasn't broken. He just operated on a different frequency, one that saw patterns the rest of us were blind to. The real change happened at school. I was in middle school by then. Some kids in my grade saw Ethan on the playground during recess, rocking back and forth by the fence. They started laughing and pointing. "Look at the weirdo," one of them yelled. The old me would have pretended I didn't know him. The old me would have burned with shame. But this new me, the me who had seen the glorious spectrum of toy cars and the secret code in his notebooks, walked right over to them. I didn't say anything tough or heroic. I just stood in front of my brother between him and them and stared at them until they got uncomfortable and walked away. I didn't turn around, but I could hear the gentle rhythmic creak of the swing as Ethan rocked. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. We were speaking the same language now, and I was finally beginning to understand. When Ethan was 9, he started the 4th grade. By then, he had made incredible progress. The little notebooks filled with symbols had transformed into notebooks filled with words. Simple, blocky letters that stated facts, e.g., toast, school, home. Had even started talking in short, precise sentences that always felt like he was reporting data. The screaming fits had become a rarity. Wed found a rhythm, a fragile peace. Then the school decided to break it. I was 13 home from school and trying to finish my homework when I heard Grandma Eleanor on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was low and tight, the way it got when she was trying not to get angry. "I don't understand, Mr. Andrews," she was saying. "Ethan's grades are excellent. His reading is 2 years above his grade level." There was a pause. I could imagine the principal on the other end, his voice calm and condescending. "It's not about academics." Grandma said, her voice rising slightly. "You want to move him to the special needs classroom because he..." "What?" "He doesn't make enough eye contact during circle time because he covers his ears when the music is too loud. That's not a reason to remove him. That's a reason to accommodate him." I put my pencil down. I knew what this was about. They saw Ethan as a problem to be managed, not a child to be taught. They wanted to put him in a separate room with the other kids who didn't fit to make things easier for the teachers. An IEP meeting. Yes, I want one, she said, her voice like steel. And I will be bringing every single piece of documentation I have. That night, Grandma Eleanor became a general preparing for war. She pulled out the plastic storage bins from her closet, the ones I'd seen her fill over the years. They were overflowing with manila folders, each one neatly labeled. Therapy. Progress 2012. School reports 2013. Medical evaluations. She spread them across the dining room table, and for the first time I saw the sheer volume of our life on paper. It was an archive of our struggle, a library of love and dedication. She looked overwhelmed, and for the first time she looked her age. I don't even know where to start, she sighed, rubbing her temples. I pulled up a chair. I can help, I said. Let's put them in order. We worked for hours, a quiet team under the dim light of the dining room lamp. I used the 3-hole punch, making neat holes in report cards and doctor's notes. I slid them into a series of thick 3-ring binders. My job was simple, mechanical, but it felt important. About an hour in, Ethan came out of his room. He stood in the doorway watching us. We were handling his life, his story, his future. He walked over to the table and looked at the piles of paper. Grandma had been trying to organize them by category school medical therapy. Ethan pointed to a stack of therapy notes. This is wrong, he said. It wasn't a criticism. It was a statement of fact. It's inefficient. Grandma and I looked at each other. What do you mean, honey? She asked gently. Sort by date first, he said, his small finger tracing a line in the air. Chronologically. Then create subfolders for each type of therapy within each year. Speech, occupational, behavioral. The data flow will be cleaner. He wasn't just a kid looking at papers. He was a systems analyst looking at a flawed database. He reached out, took the stack, and in 10 minutes, he had completely rearranged it. His system was logical, clean, and perfect. It was a structure I never would have thought of. He had taken the chaotic emotional story of his life and turned it into clear, organized data. Grandma was the archivist, the one who knew to save every receipt, every note, every scrap of proof. I was the assistant, the one who provided support. But Ethan was the architect. He was the one who understood the structure underneath it all. That night, as I clipped the last report into a binder, I realized something profound. Our family's greatest strength wasn't what we said. It wasn't in arguments or speeches. It was in the binders. It was in the carefully preserved paper trail of our lives. It was in the quiet, undeniable power of well-organized proof. By the time I was in high school, preparing for a life outside our quiet little house, Ethan had discovered a new universe. It wasn't a place you could find on a map. It was a world made of brackets, variables, and lines of text that glowed on a screen. He had found coding. It started on Grandma Eleanor's ancient beige laptop, a machine that took 5 minutes just to boot up. I came home one day to find Ethan at the kitchen table, utterly absorbed, staring at a tutorial for a programming language called Python. He was 12. While other kids were outside playing basketball, my brother was learning how to build with a language I couldn't comprehend. I was the tech guy in the family by default, which just meant I knew how to set up a Wi-Fi router. Grandma asked me, "Daniel, what is he doing? Is this for school?" "No, Grandma," I said, looking over his shoulder at the screen. "This is something else. He's building things." That Christmas, I convinced Grandma to use some of her savings to get him a real computer. I helped her pick it out a machine with a fast processor and a big monitor. I remember her worrying if it was too much money. I told her, "Think of it as an investment." It was the smartest investment our family ever made. Ethan's room transformed. It became a command center. He spent every spare moment in there, the click of his keyboard a constant rhythmic presence in our house. He never asked for help, but sometimes he would call me in. I was the only person he ever showed his work to. "Look," he'd say, pointing to a window on his screen. "I wrote a script." "What does it do?" I'd ask. "It sorts files," he'd answer. "But not just by name or date. It sorts them by metadata. I can find every file created in a specific month on a specific computer and verify if it has been modified." To me, it was a neat trick. To him, it was fundamental. One evening, I found him with a scanner hooked up to his new computer. Beside him was one of Grandma's thick binders, the one from the 4th grade fight. He was carefully scanning each page one by one. Report cards, therapy, notes, the principal's letters. "What are you doing, Ethan?" I asked. "You're not planning on throwing those out, are you?" He didn't look up. "No, I'm digitizing them. Paper degrades, data is permanent." Then I asked the question that changed my understanding of everything. "But why? What's the point?" He stopped, turned his chair, and looked at me. His eye contact was still fleeting, but his gaze was intense. "I'm building a system to verify the truth," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "People lie. Data doesn't." It hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a hobby. It wasn't a school project or something he was doing for fun. This was his life's work, and it had been born from the trauma of our childhood. It was a defense mechanism forged from abandonment and the constant need to prove his own worth to a world that didn't understand him. He wasn't just learning to code, he was building a fortress of facts. Over the next 2 years, his project grew in scope. He convinced Grandma to let him scan everything. Everything. Old utility bills from the year Clara left. Bank statements going back a decade. My old report cards. Every official document that had ever entered our house. He called them baseline data points. He wasn't just preserving our past. He was indexing it, cross-referencing it, and building an unchangeable, verifiable timeline of our lives. He was creating a private digital fortress where every fact was time-stamped, every event was logged, and every truth was locked in place, safe from the flawed, treacherous world of human memory and human lies. I thought he was just coping with his past. I had no idea he was building the weapon we would need to survive our future. I was a sophomore in college studying engineering 2 states away when I got the call from Grandma Eleanor. Her voice was a strange mix of giddy and completely bewildered. "Daniel," she said, "you're not going to believe this. Ethan, he sold his system." I almost dropped my phone. "What do you mean he sold it to who?" "A big company, a security firm," she explained, stumbling over the words. "They offered him, Daniel, they offered him millions of dollars." Whoa. It turned out that Ethan, now a quiet, perpetually focused 15-year-old, had taken his project to the next level. He had refined his truth verification system into a sophisticated piece of software that could analyze any digital document, a contract, a legal file, a photo, and detect the slightest trace of forgery or manipulation. It could spot faked signatures, altered timestamps, and metadata inconsistencies that the human eye would never catch. Using the research skills he'd honed over years of focused interest, he identified a handful of corporate security firms and sent them a cold professional email with a demonstration. One of them, a major player in the cybersecurity world, saw the genius in it. They didn't just see a clever program. They saw a revolutionary new way to combat digital fraud. Later, when the local news got wind of the story, they spun it like a fairy tale. Autistic teen becomes overnight millionaire. People hear a number like $3, $2 million, and they think it's a lottery ticket. It wasn't like that. I had to explain it to my own friends. Ethan didn't sell a company with an office and employees. He sold the most valuable thing he owned, the intellectual property. He sold the core algorithm, the years of code, the literal brain of the system he had built in his bedroom. The company wasn't buying a business. They were buying a brilliant, one-of-a-kind mind, and they were paying for the years of silent, obsessive work it took to create it. It was the price of his genius. I was incredibly proud, but a part of me was also terrified. Our quiet life, the predictable system that Grandma and I had so carefully maintained for Ethan, had just been blown wide open. A local TV station came to the house to do a human interest story. I watched it online from my dorm room. There was my little brother looking uncomfortable under the bright lights trying to explain his creation. "It verifies document authenticity," he said, staring straight at the camera, not blinking. "It finds forgeries. People lie. This is for when the truth matters." The segment was cheesy, full of dramatic music and talk of overcoming the odds. But it did its job. It broadcast his success and that big flashy number to the world. A few days later, I called home to see how they were holding up. Grandma sounded overwhelmed but happy. Then I talked to Ethan. I expected him to be, if not excited, then at least satisfied. He wasn't. His voice over the phone was flat tense. "It was a mistake to do the interview," he said. "What are you talking about, man? You deserve the recognition," I told him. "Recognition is irrelevant," he replied. "Information is what matters. We've just broadcast sensitive information to an unsecured network." I didn't understand what he meant. "What sensitive information?" "The money," he said. "The amount. It's a data point that can trigger an external event." I felt a chill go down my spine, a feeling I hadn't had since I was a kid watching my mother's red car drive away. He was talking like a security analyst, not a 16-year-old kid. "Ethan, what's going on?" There was a pause. Then he said, "Daniel, I need a favor. Can you find Grandma's old bank statements, specifically from 2010 to 2012? The paper copies. I need you to scan them and send them to me on a secure server. I need to complete the timeline." My blood ran cold. He wasn't celebrating. He wasn't looking at colleges or planning a future. He was going back to the beginning, to the year our mother left. He was reinforcing the walls of his digital fortress. My little brother wasn't enjoying his victory. He was preparing for a war. I was on the next bus home. The 2-day ride felt like an eternity. When I finally walked through Grandma Eleanor's front door, the cheerful cinnamon-scented house of my childhood felt like a fortress under siege. We met with our lawyer the next day. Her name was Anya Sharma, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who seemed to be the only person not intimidated by the situation. We sat around her polished conference table, the three of us on one side, a thick stack of papers from Clara's lawyer on the other. Ms. Sharma slid the stack toward us. "This is what they've filed," she said, her face grim. "I need you to look at this, and I need you to be honest with me." It was a masterclass in fiction. There was a co-parenting agreement, allegedly signed by both Clara and Grandma Eleanor in 2011, outlining a plan for remote support. There were photocopies of what looked like money order receipts, one for nearly every month of the past 10 years, with amounts ranging from $200 to $500. There was a typed-out log of phone calls and supposed visitations, complete with dates and notes like, "Discussed Ethan's progress with his mother." And on the most important documents in the bottom corner was the embossed circular stamp of a notary public, a seal of authenticity, a lie made to look like the gospel truth. I saw the color drain from Grandma Eleanor's face. Her hands, usually so steady from years of gardening and baking, were trembling as she touched the papers. "But this isn't my signature," she whispered, pointing to the co-parenting agreement. "I've never seen this before in my life." "I believe you," Ms. Sharma said softly. "But they look perfect, professionally done. On paper, Clara has built a very strong case that she has been a consistent, supportive presence. And you," she said, looking at Grandma, "never filed for formal guardianship, did you?" Grandma shook her head. "I didn't think I needed to. He's my grandson." "I know," Ms. Sharma sighed. "But legally that leaves a door open. Without hard forensic proof that these documents are fraudulent, a judge might believe her. We could lose this. Lose this. The words echoed in the silent room. Lose Ethan's future, his security, everything Grandma had fought for. That night, I couldn't stand it anymore. The sight of Grandma sitting at the kitchen table staring blankly at the wall was too much. I marched to Ethan's room and threw open the door. He was exactly where I knew he'd be sitting in the glow of his 3 monitors' lines of code scrolling past on one of them. "Are you even listening to what's happening out there?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a rage I couldn't control. "They have documents, Ethan fake but perfect Ms. Sharma says we could lose. We're about to lose everything, and you're just sitting here." He didn't turn around. He didn't flinch. He just kept typing for a few more seconds, then stopped. "I hear you," he said, his voice completely calm. "Then do something, say something, don't you get it?" He finally swiveled his chair around. His face was blank, but his eyes were laser-focused. "Daniel," he said, and the placid certainty in his voice chilled me to the bone. Let them present everything in court. Let them put every fake document, every false receipt, every single lie onto the official record." "Why?" I choked out. "Why would we do that?" He turned back to his screen. "Because," he said, and I could hear the faint rapid click of his keyboard starting up again. "I need all their data." The courtroom was cold and smelled like old paper. I sat beside Grandma Eleanor, my hand gripping hers so tightly my knuckles were white. Across the aisle, my mother Clara was putting on the performance of a lifetime. Dressed in a soft, modest sweater, she dabbed at her eyes with a tissue as her lawyer, Mr. Callahan, painted a picture of a struggling mother who had done her best from afar. He presented the evidence with a flourish. The co-parenting agreement, the money order receipts, the visitation logs. They were projected onto a large screen for the judge to see, a decade of lies notarized and authenticated. Callahan's voice was smooth, confident. "As you can see, Your Honor, my client has been a consistent and supportive part of her son's life." The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, looked over the documents with a neutral expression. My heart sank. They looked real. They looked undeniable. When it was our turn, Ms. Sharma did her best. She presented Grandma's binders, showing years of school records and therapy bills paid out of a retired teacher's pension. But it was our word against their paper, and their paper had official-looking stamps. The judge looked at Grandma with sympathy, but her words were like a death sentence. "Mrs. Cooper," she said, "I see a grandmother who has done a wonderful job, but I don't see any legal documents transferring custody. Without them, the mother's parental rights remain." I saw a flicker of a triumphant smile on Clara's face. It was over. We were going to lose. And then a calm, quiet voice cut through the silence. "Your Honor." Everyone turned. Ethan was standing up. He had been perfectly still and silent the entire time, just observing. Now he stood tall, his hands clasped behind his back. The judge looked surprised. "Yes, young man. I have evidence to present." Callahan jumped to his feet. "Objection. This is highly irregular. The boy is not a witness, and we have received no disclosure of new evidence." Ethan didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the judge. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady, "our lawyer, Ms. Sharma, is in possession of a flash drive. It contains a full forensic digital analysis of the plaintiff's submitted documents. With the court's permission, I can explain the key findings." I wrote the algorithm used for the analysis. The room went silent. A 16-year-old boy who had just been described as a special needs child was offering to present forensic evidence he had created. The judge stared at him for a long moment, her curiosity clearly outweighing protocol. "Proceed," she said. "I want to hear this." Ms. Sharma connected the drive to the courtroom's system. The first document that appeared on the screen was Clara's co-parenting agreement, dated 2011. Ethan spoke his voice clear and devoid of emotion, like a machine reporting its findings. The document is dated November 14, 2011. However, the digital metadata embedded in the PDF file shows it was created on March 22nd of this year, 2 days after the news story about my software sale aired. A low murmur went through the room. Callahan was on his feet again, sputtering, but the judge waved him into silence. "Next," Ethan said. A new image appeared, a close-up of Grandma's forged signature next to a real one from her driver's license. My system analyzed 37 known examples of my grandmother's signature from our family records against the one on this document. The analysis shows a 92.7% probability that the signature is a forgery based on inconsistencies in pressure slant and letter formation. He was just getting started. One by one, he dismantled their entire case, not with emotion or accusations, but with cold, hard data. The plaintiff claims she sent a $500 money order in April 2015. This is a scan of my grandmother's complete itemized bank statement for that entire year. No such deposit exists. The plaintiff's visitation log claims she visited on my 8th birthday. This is the school attendance record digitally time-stamped by the district showing I was present in class. And this, he said, flashing a photo on the screen, is a time-stamped digital photograph from my birthday party that evening. My mother is not in it. Each slide was a nail in the coffin of their lies. Ethan wasn't just a witness. He was the evidence, the investigator, and the expert all in one. He had turned his life into an unalterable cross-referenced database of truth. When he was finished, the courtroom was utterly silent. Clara's face was ashen. Callahan looked like he'd been physically struck. The judge took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. She didn't deliver the final verdict right then. She was a woman of process. "The court will take this drive into evidence," she said, her voice sharp as glass. "The plaintiff's documents will be handed over to a forensic expert for independent verification. However," she added, locking eyes with Clara, "based on what has been presented here today, this court sees significant evidence of perjury and fraud." She banged her gavel. We knew in that moment that we had won, not with tears or pleading. We had won with the quiet, relentless power of the truth. The final ruling came a few weeks later. It was just a formality. Grandma Eleanor was granted full permanent guardianship. The judge, true to her word, referred Clara's case to the district attorney for perjury and fraud. She ended up with probation and court-ordered community service. We never heard from her again. Life didn't just go back to normal. It found a new, better normal. The sale of Ethan's software included a non-compete clause, so he couldn't work in document verification anymore. Instead, he started a small software testing company out of his bedroom. His first employees were people like him, brilliant minds from the local autism resource center, people who saw the patterns no one else did. He wasn't just building code anymore. He was building a community. The day I was set to go back to college, I stood in the doorway of his room watching him work. He was in his element, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He didn't look up when he spoke. "Thank you, Daniel," he said, his voice quiet, "for not leaving." My throat felt tight. "Never, man," I managed to say. "Never." As I was driving out of town, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Ethan. Just 2 words. "System stable." I smiled. He wasn't talking about his computers. He was talking about us. Our little family of 3. We were safe. We were secure. The system, built on a foundation of truth and held together by love, was finally stable. So how did our story make you feel? Please leave your honest thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback is so important, and it helps us create even better stories for you.